Yeah, I was involved with this kung fu group out of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
That's what kind of got me YouTubing.
Okay.
Because he had a really nice YouTube channel set up.
Oh, okay.
And he was making about an extra $1,000 a month off of his YouTube.
Is that right, eh? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he was a much more charismatic guy than I am.
So is it just based on hits that you get?
Yeah, it's how many hits and how long they stay on the commercial before they shift over.
Okay. I gotcha.
And you don't get much. It's like fractions of a cent,
Sure.
But slowly building up, I've started to finally make something off of the channel. So I'm hoping just to over time, build an audience that's interested in what I'm doing, and then
that's cool.
But I have such an eclectic mix of stuff on there, so
okay.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm kind of all over
the
place.
It's nice because you can kind of appeal to all different groups and interests, right? So
yeah, a bunch of different stuff for sure.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
So I don't know if am I close enough to
You're
your mic
great
here?
right there. I can hear you just fine. So
cool.
Yeah. So basically, I'll just introduce you. I get you to. I don't know if you want to chat a little bit, sort of about sort of what you do, and in terms of working at Red Crow, and
sure,
and talking about who hires you to do the snakes to catch
the
them?
city of Blackfoot.
It's the city. Okay,
yeah.
So I'll probably chat with you about that
too.
Sure,
absolutely. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I've got all different
all
things
over
going
the
on,
things.
but I do have there is a unity to them. They tie together for me.
Okay.
So we can get there.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. All right, you ready?
I am.
Here we go. Okay, everyone. So it's been a while since we've had a guest on the show. Actually, it's been a couple weeks, which has probably been the longest that we've gone without actually having somebody else talking other than myself. Since we basically started the podcast, so I was under the weather for a few weeks and really busy with some other stuff. So wasn't able to have anybody on, but we've got a great guest. So Ryan Heavyhead there, and Ryan, he does a few different things. So one of the things, probably one of the first things we'll talk about. So you're at Red Crow College, sorry?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
On the Blood Reserve.
On the Blood Reserve. So I wanted to chat with somebody because when I started this podcast, I mean, obviously it's a little bit about Lethbridge. It's about a lot of different things, but I also wanted to make sure that I was getting an opportunity to chat with somebody who could talk about the First Nations community.
Right.
I mean, this is traditional Blackfoot territory, right? So I absolutely wanted to have a chat with you or with someone else, and so I appreciate you being on the show.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us at Red Crow, what's your involvement there with?
I was recruited to work at Red Crow in 2002.
Okay.
Under a new program that was started there called Ghana Studies, which was at the time it was kind of a laddering program into the university.
Mm-hmm.
We had a 1-year certificate and a 2-year diploma.
Okay.
And it's an undergraduate program that's really Blackfoot specific, so it focuses on traditional knowledge and language.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, I was recruited in 2002, and then about a year later, we had some real heavy resistance to what we were doing out there.
Okay. From who? From who's?
It actually came from. We had at the time an arts and science program as well, like a kind of a mimic of what you'd find at the university.
Okay.
And one of the instructors for the arts and science program decided to start telling our students that they were wasting their training funds taking Ghana Studies.
Oh.
And so she kind of led our students into this into this negative spin.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was some resistance. She was confronted about it, this instructor, and she resigned, and then she tried to get some legal action going, and there was rumors around the community that none of our courses were transferable to any other institutions and this kind of a thing. And so it just wasn't a nice time, 2003, 2004 over there, and at that time, the stress of the situation had the director of the program, who was Narcissus Blood. He had to take a leave because the stress was it was affecting him physically.
Yeah.
And so I was asked to step in as the coordinator of the program in the interim until we found out what was happening with Narcissus.
Okay.
And I just started, I had a thick skin anyway, because as a guy that doesn't come from, I didn't grow up in the Blood Reserve.
Sure.
We should talk about that.
Okay. Yeah.
But as a kind of outsider that married into the Blood Reserve, I already had a thick skin. So,
Okay.
So the resistance didn't affect me as strongly, and I just started. I knew that our president and our elders had already given us license to go forward with this program,
Right. Yeah.
regardless of anybody's sentiments about whether it met whatever standards of the mainstream. That's not what the program
That's
is
not
about.
what it was about.
Right?
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I just went ahead and went forward with it and started building it, and pulling together a research component. It just happened at that time, around that same era, 2003, 2004. The federal government decided to explore some things with First Nations communities. They have a tri-council on federal research. So they have a health research council and a science research council, and they also have a social science research council.
Shirk and NSERC.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Shirk piloted this program they called the Aboriginal Research Program in 2003, where they were, for the very first time, opening themselves up to proposals from First Nations organizations, whether or not they had any kind of university affiliations.
Okay.
Which was very different. Up until that time, even if you were at Lethbridge College, if you didn't have a affiliation with a university, you can't access Shirk money.
Okay. And which is now no longer the case, because you can't access NSERC and Shirk. Yeah.
But that's the way it was.
Okay.
Up until 2003, when this Aboriginal research program came out, and when they held a dialogue going into that about how they were going to be looking at Aboriginal research, they invited me to participate in that dialogue. It was kind of a nationwide thing, and they brought some people together physically, and then they did some internet stuff. And I participated in some of the internet stuff, but the guy who was directing the program was really impressed with some of the things I was saying about Blackfoot research methodologies and stuff. He got very excited, right? This is exactly what they wanted to hear.
Right.
And so in the first round of this pilot program, we put forward a proposal, and they funded it. And so we became the first college, not only Aboriginal college, but the first college in Canada to administer Shirk funds.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
it's quite a feather.
Yeah, that's right. That was a 3-year research project, and we were looking at Blackfoot influences on Western society.
Okay.
And the basic premise was, we've had, in Blackfoot communities, we've had people from mainstream universities who are doing their graduate studies or postdocs or what have you, coming out to the community for 100-some years. Right? Every summer you get kind of a wave of these guys coming out to the community. You sit with the elders and learn from them, and then they go back and write their theses or dissertations or books or papers or what have you.
Right.
And they're learning a lot from the elders. And so we figured something has to be coming
Sure.
from that. There's got to be a ripple into Western society, right?
Yeah.
And so we wanted to look at, and it was kind of toward the reason that we wanted to look at that as our research project was kind of just to reinforce the notion that there is some significance to traditional knowledge that can be beneficial to the mainstream. And look, you've been using it all along, right? So, so we did several case studies in that, and the biggest one, the one that gained the most attention, was looking at Blackfoot influences on Abraham Maslow, who came out to Siksika Reserve in 1938, a really hard scientist
Right.
trained on primates under Harry Harlow,
Yeah.
and it completely rocked his world.
Is that right?
He had this idea when he came out. He had this this kind of idea that he had discovered this psychological universal. With his time with Harlow, he'd been working with these primates, and he'd seen that no matter what species, they all kind of form these social hierarchies
Right.
that
Yeah.
are put in place and kept in place through
Yeah.
acts of relationships of dominance and submission, and basically like aggression, like rape.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
and submission. And so that was in Wisconsin. They worked under Harlow for his dissertation work, and he kind of got some. That was his first little article that kind of got him some recognition. Then he moved to New York, and he wanted to get into the circles at Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
He actually wanted to work at Columbia. It was then Columbia College, now Columbia University. But then he ended up. They didn't take him, so he ended up at Brooklyn. But he still worked his way into the circles at Columbia, and he got he started testing what he'd seen with the primates in interviews with Columbia students. He developed this what do you call it, a personality index, and basically it was a questionnaire where he would the first half of the questionnaire would be very leading questions where he could rate somebody's kind of ego, security.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do you feel better about yourself than so and so, or do you
Right.
who's the biggest liar and this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then the second half of the questionnaire got really in detail about their sex lives.
Mm.
And what he found with students at Columbia was that people that seemed to have really strong egos were also very experimental with their sex lives.
Okay.
And those who didn't have strong egos were very conservative.
Okay.
And so he thought, all right, this is the same thing happening with people as
Yeah.
as I saw with the monkeys.
What's interesting, it reminds me of, what is it? I think it was Yes Prime Minister. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but
No.
Sir Humphrey Appleby, and yes, one of the cabinet ministers is caught up in this situation, and anyway, with having affairs or whatever, and why this person can't be the prime minister. He said, generally the rule of thumb is that I found that people who are active and very active in one area of life are equally active in all the others. So there must be some truth to that then.
Yeah, it was interesting, right? So he thinks he's stumbled onto something huge.
Mm.
He thinks he's got this kind of universal theory about the psychology of primates, including humans.
Mhm.
And he gets invited into this colloquia that Ruth Benedict, the famous anthropologist, is running.
Okay.
And so what her interest is, she's inviting people from various disciplines into this colloquia to talk about how they can use what they're learning from their disciplines to benefit Western society, to fix problems that Western society has. And one of the big problems that they were looking at this time, this would be 1936-37, was the strong kind of competition and jungle mentality in Western society. That it's survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah.
This kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And Maslow walks into this colloquia, and the hotshot young scholar guy, and he says, "Well, you can't fix that." And I'll tell you why. This is just the way our psychological makeup, and I've seen it in all of these different species, and I've tested it with students here at Columbia even, and we're naturally competitive, as primates. And we create these social hierarchies, and we have these relationships of dominance and submission that I've seen all across the board.
Right.
And Ruth says, well, young Abe, you've never stepped into another culture
Right.
to test this theory.
Right.
Why don't you go into another cultural context and see if this idea holds?
Right. Yeah.
And she had in mind sending him to Siksika at the time. She was looking at sending students to all of the Blackfoot communities. She herself went to Browning, Montana.
Oh, okay, I was going to ask what the connection was there.
Yeah,
so,
she went to Browning. She sent Esther Goldfrank to Ghana to hear on the Blood Reserve. She sent Oscar Lewis, who's another famous anthropologist, to Gunny, and then she sent Abraham Maslow with one of her students, Jane Richardson, to Siksika. And the reason she was interested in Blackfoot communities was because all of them had, you know, first of all, they're all related, they all speak the same language, all have the same culture, but they all kind of faced colonization a little bit differently in each of these communities.
Okay.
Siksika at the time had set up the first kind of social security system of any tribe. They had sold part of their reserve and taken that money and put it in trust and used it for people. You know, people could put in proposals if they want to start business. They might be able to pull a little bit of that trust and buy the tools that they need to start their business. They also used it to take care of elderly. Right, so they had kind of set up their own social security thing. Gunny had been kind of swindled out of almost all of their reserve. They were left with just a little bit, and they didn't have any trust or anything like
Swindled
this.
by who?
By
whom?
Yeah, by the Indian agents of the time.
Oh, I see.
This happened at all the Canadian reserves. The agents all at the same time. They were looking for places where they could give land to war veterans that were coming home.
Okay.
And so they were trying to buy off chunks of the reserves, and they'd hold these these votes to see if the community would be willing to sell off parts of their reserve. And in most cases, the community, really didn't want to sell it, but some of these votes would be, they'd have like people that had passed away would have voted. And,
kind of like a Chicago election there, where you go along the tombstones and look at all the voters that
So this happened here, at the Blood Reserve, at Gunny, and at Siksika. Siksika actually, got some money for it and put it in trust. Gunny got zip.
Why is so different there? Why, like, what?
I think
what
that
the difference?
I don't know for sure. I can't. I would just be speculating. But I think Siksika really they were interested in doing this and creating the system,
so
whereas Gunny was just ripped off.
The
Blood Reserve was ripped off as well. The whole northern section of the reserve was taken, but at the time, this is Chief Crawford Wolf's time. And he looked at he wanted to see, okay, you said we voted yes for this, I want to see the votes. And he started looking at it and said, no, these people aren't even alive, right? So he took that stuff to Ottawa and says, this is bogus.
Yeah.
And they had to re-vote on the Blood Reserve.
Okay.
And it was turned down.
Okay, yeah.
And then the Indian agent on the reserve went ahead and leased all that land anyway.
Oh,
right?
seriously? Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So there's these three different situations here, and then it's completely different from the U.S., where in the U.S. they just allow non-natives to come and live on the reserve and ranch on the reserve.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of the reserve is, even though it's officially like tribal land, it's totally occupied by non-natives. So it's very different situations.
Okay. Yeah.
Ruth Benedict was interested in how the people were adapting to these different situations. Maslow was just in it to, of course, to test his ideas.
Right.
So he came to Siksika and he started off with his questionnaires, right? So he's asking people to talk bad about each other, and, and then get into their real details of their sex lives and stuff. And of course, he just completely hit a wall. Like nobody was participating in his questionnaires. People refused to talk bad about each other.
Yeah.
And he didn't understand it because, watching people and engaging with people, he said, these people have, like, almost everybody has a really strong, ego-secure personality, but they refuse to badmouth each other.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not the same law
it's a
of the
different
jungle.
thing.
Yeah.
And he he's got an unpublished paper that we got from the archives of History of American Psychology in Akron, Ohio. It was called Blackfoot Psychology, but he estimated 90%, 85 to 90% of the people at Siksika had this psychological quality and this ego security that he saw in only like the top 5 or 10% of his society.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so he's trying to figure out what's going on here. And that, of course, what he's talking about there is self-actualization. And so he's looking at Siksika societies, seeing almost everybody is this thing. He wouldn't call it self-actualization for some years yet.
Okay.
But almost all of them have this quality. What's going on here? And he starts looking at, different aspects of the culture. One of the things that he looks at is child rearing.
Okay.
And he sees that they have people at Siksika have a very different way of approaching child rearing, where the child is actually kind of treated as a full social member already. He's not just somebody with this thing with a deficit that you got to fix and all of this.
Okay.
So he gives these couple of examples. He says, I was in this cabin visiting with this family, and one evening, it's a one-room little cabin, and there's this young boy, maybe 2 or 3 years old, trying to get the door to the cabin open, and he's kind of fussing with it, and he's getting frustrated.
Yeah.
And Maslow's thinks, okay, this kid is going to start causing some problems and interrupting our conversation and stuff, and he's getting concerned, and he says, my first instinct was to jump up and open the door for the kid, and it was distracting to me.
Sure.
But nobody else seemed to be paying any attention to this, right?
Yeah.
So he decided, and this is the kind of like how conscious he was of being a scientist in a way, social scientist. So I decided I was gonna follow the lead of everybody else and pretend like this thing isn't happening.
Right. Yeah.
It's gonna explode. So then the boy got the door open, and all of a sudden everybody who he thought wasn't paying any attention started to praise the boy for his accomplishment in getting the door open. He said, a little light bulb went off, and Maslow, he says, they were letting him learn to do that.
Right.
I don't have any respect for the kid. I'm just going to open it for him, right?
Right.
Instead of letting him do his learning.
Yeah.
He saw another situation where a 10-year-old boy was taking care of a bundle, a medicine bundle. And this is there are children like that. Even still today, we call them Minipuka, like a favorite child. It's actually literally berry child.
It's what? Sorry.
Berry child.
Oh,
Because
okay.
they used to, we get in the ceremonies. There's berry soup, and these children would get to lick everybody's bowls afterwards of the berry children.
Okay. Yeah.
Favorite children, and there oftentimes will be transferred things.
What? Just out of curiosity, why? How are they seen as favorite? Like, what's?
It'll just be a child that his parents will, it could be his parents, could be his grandparents, will kind of look at him and they'll want to groom him special.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's these kind of favored.
Yeah. It's not necessarily an objective sort of. It's just.
No.
Just something about the
the
child. Yeah.
Something about the child they want to.
Okay.
Invest extra in this child.
Yeah.
And there's different kind of like there's also what we call kipitapuk, like a elderly child.
Okay.
And this would be a child that will be given to grandparents to raise.
Oh. Okay.
So that they'll learn from those grandparents. So it turns out that it's kind of a good investment to do this with the children, because sometimes they get transferred knowledge and things that almost gets lost, in a very oral culture.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
If nobody seeks that, in the generations in the interim, a younger generation might decide they want to renew that, and then you have this older person who was a Minipuka or Kipitapuka when they were very young, and they're able to pass that on. And that's happened like several times recently as we've started to like repatriate some of societies that were, the religious societies
Mm-hmm.
that were almost lost.
Okay.
But yeah, he saw this Minipuka, and he said there was a man who had a dream that he was supposed to have that bundle that the child had transferred to him. So he went to go talk to the child, and he asked to have it transferred to him. And the boy, who was 10 years old, he told the man, "You'll come back in 4 days, and I'll have an answer for you whether I'm going to do it or not." So the man went away, and then the kid picked up his blanket and he walked out into the coulees, and he was gone for 4 days to go sleep out in the coulees and
Mm-hmm.
get his answer.
Okay.
And Maslow looked at that and said, "I couldn't imagine that happening in Minnesotan society."
There's no way, right? There's no way.
Here's a 10-year-old boy
Yeah.
who has, custody of some cultural patrimony,
Yeah.
a spiritual bundle
Yeah.
that he's responsible for taking care of, and then he gets to decide whether or not this goes to whoever to transfer. And to make that decision, he's going to walk out in the wilderness
For 4 days.
For 4 days and sleep alone with
Yeah.
just his blanket.
Mm-hmm.
It would never happen.
Never. Certainly never happened today.
yeah, exactly. So he's looking at that. He said, there's a really different relationship that
Right.
society has with their children. Some of that goes into feeding his understanding of the hierarchy of needs later.
Okay.
Not all of it. Like, part of his understanding of the hierarchy of needs comes from the primates, because he saw this thing called salient appetite.
Mm.
He said, you feed this monkey day after day the same food. They'll get to the point where they'll just eat enough to not be hungry,
Right.
and they'll leave
Yeah.
the rest of it there.
Mm.
But say you do that, and they eat, and they get, they satiate their appetite, then you introduce some treat that they don't normally get. Suddenly they're hungry again.
Right.
They'll eat some more.
Yeah.
So this is what, this is part of what went into his later model of hierarchy of needs.
Okay.
But when he's looking at people and what they need to become self-actualized, a lot of the stuff he's learning at Siksika starts playing into it.
Okay.
He also looked at the kind of altruism that was going on in the community that he didn't see in his own society in New York. He said they gave a couple of different examples again that you find in his books and such. And he says, they were at the Sundance ceremony, and he said this man came there with all of his worldly possessions, everything he owned. Him and his family brought, and they piled up there at the Sundance. And then he stood in front of everybody, and he talked about himself and said, you all know me and all these things that I've done in my life, and what a great person I am, and this kind of thing. And Maslow kind of depicted it like the guy's boasting about himself.
Right.
And then when he's done, he gave all his stuff away, and he left with just the shirt on his back.
Wow.
And Maslow thought, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
If I go to Central Park and I bring all of my stuff with me,
Yeah.
and I just give it away, basically I'm homeless, right?
Right.
There's no benefit to this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So he started looking for, what's going on here, and he befriended this young, charismatic leader, one of the council at the time, named Teddy Yellowfly. And Teddy was the only person in Siksika who had a car. This was the very first car at Siksika in 1938.
Okay.
And what it meant for Teddy was he had to, he bought the car, and he had to maintain the car.
Mm.
But everybody gets to drive Teddy's car.
Okay.
If they want to go somewhere, they just go to Teddy and say,
Yeah.
we need to go to here, and either he's driving them or he's giving them the keys, and they're taking off with the car. And so the whole community had a lot of pride. It was like their car.
Right. Yeah.
And so we got a car.
Yeah.
And so Maslow's looking at this, and he said, here's another example.
Yeah.
Right? I would never do this.
That never happened. Yeah.
But then he sees one day there's this big public gathering, and Teddy Yellowfly shows up, and he makes an announcement. He says, on such and such a day, I'm going to be castrating and branding my calves. That's all he says. That's his announcement. And the day comes, and sure enough, there's a bunch of young guys there to
Right.
to help him out. Not there because they're going to get paid or anything
Right.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But and Maslow sees this and says, this is what's going on here. A guy that's really generous and gives him gives to this in this particular culture. It's like an investment. He can expect to be treated equally well, and so this ends up going into his what would later in his career be his work on organizational synergy and enlightenment management, this kind of thing. He gets home from Siksika, and this is how much how drastically you can see that it affected him. That summer, he gets home from Siksika, and right away his wife has had their first child, a daughter, while he was away. And when he gets home, he goes around his apartment complex, and door to door, talking to his neighbors and saying, "Look, I just came from this place where I saw children being treated like this, and I'll tell you right now, my door's open to your children.
Oh wow! Okay.
They can come and go as they please. I'll treat them just like my own.
Wow.
They can sleep over whenever they want, raid my fridge, whatever. And I hope that you'll treat my daughter the same." And of course, it never. This project never flew, but he tried to create on a micro scale, and where he's from, something they saw over here, and then he started a course that September that was the very first ever normative human psychology course.
Okay.
So where do you think he gets his model for normal? What's a normal human? He drops his whole hard science thing altogether.
Yeah.
From that summer on, he never does experimental science again.
Okay.
And he says, from now on, I'm going to be an intuitive learner. And he starts a notebook series called the Good Human Being Notebooks. And in these notebooks, he tries to collect biographies of people in Western society that he sees have qualities similar to what he saw in the majority of people at Siksika.
Right. Yeah.
And he's trying to compare them biographically to try to figure out what's the common thread between them and this kind of thing. About 5 years later, he publishes The Hierarchy of Needs, and his first self-actualization comes out, and he was heavily like the stuff that everybody who's gone to school has been Maslow influenced one way or another, because your teachers are taught.
Yeah. And I remember talking about it in anthropology, psychology,
the class, the whole school situation. I mean, even like when you get hot lunches and stuff in school, that was all from Maslow's stuff. That was all, you got to take care of the basic needs before they're going to be able to, move on and get That was all about the development. Even family life in the mainstream changed because of Maslow's stuff, and certainly business. Businesses never had this. We'll give you stock in our company, buy-in and stuff, and we should call, just refer to everybody in the business as, we're just one big family, we're a team, this kind of thing. Yeah. They were trying to create the kind of high synergy that Maslow talked about, that he saw in that kind of generosity in the society, that whoever gives to the collective most benefits the most from the collective.
Right.
So he tried to go around and basically fix businesses with problems by trying to make them high synergy. Okay. All of this. So anyway, I've totally gone on.
No, but that's good. That's good stuff though, because I had no idea. I had no idea that Maslow was here. Yeah. It's interesting. It's hilarious. People. As I do this podcast, I learn things about Lethbridge. The people that have come here and done research, here or there or on this subject or that subject, it's all sort of within a 2-hour radius, and you never heard about it. Never.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. So.
Yeah. You don't hear about this. Even the guys like I've been around the U.S. and Canada presenting this. And to some of the people that have spent their whole lifetimes kind of researching Maslow, they're psychological historians and stuff. And even though it was always right in front of them, they never saw that this was such an important influence.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, in his most famous biography, there's a chapter about it that lays a lot of this out, but it doesn't really. Again, the author doesn't really even see how much this.
Doesn't make the connection.
Yeah, it doesn't make the connection. Yeah. And the chapter's called like Follies with the Blackfoot, right? Just totally doesn't get it that this guy transformed.
Yeah, it was a worldview change.
Totally, yeah. Major gestalt shift.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was something that kind of like doing that study, getting the Shirk funds, kind of got us some attention and helped us rekindle the program that was under some political pressure.
Right.
And then so now the program's about 12 years old, and we've built it up to be where we're doing our own. We're granting our own degrees, and it's very. In a way, it's a very subversive program because we're still not asking anybody's permission. It's not accredited by anybody other than Blood Tribe.
Right. Yeah.
Just last month, Blood Tribe Chief and Council voted unanimously to recognize Ghana Studies Awards equally for people seeking employment on reserve to any outside
any degree or diploma or anything like that. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a big deal for us.
Yeah,
too,
that would be. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've got now about 70 courses on the books. We've got our first graduate student in Ghana Studies.
Yeah.
And we've got an undergraduate program that's been delivering, that's been granting degrees for about 3-4 years now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I guess where I'm really interested in. I mean, this is a great way of getting into it. Is talking about the difference, because I mean you highlighted it right there in terms of the difference of worldview in terms between Western European cultural perspectives of the world and Blackfoot. So I get maybe this maybe. Threading the needle a little bit, but what would you say is the biggest difference, like in terms of viewing the world?
Wow. Yeah.
That might be a big one. Break it down, maybe one or two things.
The biggest difference, I think the biggest difference is the relationship to place.
Okay.
I'm surprised I can answer this one, but
okay.
I think I can. I think I do have an opinion.
It's the magic of the podcast.
Yeah. I think it's relationship to place.
Okay.
The mainstream is kind of a culture of disjunction. Like myself, I'm originally from the mainstream culture, and I don't live where my parents raised me.
What is your background, Brian? What's
I grew up in Western Oregon.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was told that I was part Blackfoot growing up, which is part of why I ended up here.
Okay. Yeah.
But of course, I'm a hodgepodge of like most people in the mainstream. And but there's this training that you receive like from almost from birth in the mainstream, this disjunctive training where say you go so long and you're with your mom, right? You're with your mom and you're being raised in your family and this kind of thing, and brothers and sisters and dads and aunts and uncles and family friends and this kind of thing. And then one day you're brought to this building and you're given a surrogate parent.
Right. Yeah.
And surrogate siblings.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be here for now and doing this. And when I know when that happened to me, like I didn't go to kindergarten. Some kids are great at going to school.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, they're excited about it and all this, but I wasn't excited.
Yeah.
I was like, this is terrible.
Freaky. Yeah.
I was crying. And,
yeah.
We go out on recess and I just walk home. And
okay. I was kind of the same way. Although I was too far from school to walk home. But yeah.
I was just a block away.
Okay.
But it was not fun for me at all. But okay, you're in this new context. You get a surrogate parent, and you've only got that parent for a year, right? And then you're going to get another parent.
Another one, yeah.
And probably some few of the same people, but there would be different people too. And you go whatever 5-6 years in that building, and then you got to go to a whole different building,
Right.
with new people and new peers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you're just trained again and again to like have these shifting relationships all the way as you're growing up. You're even told, like, when you're in that building, you know, close relationships are not rewarded. You know, you guys are having too much fun. We gotta separate you, right?
Right.
You know, you're good friends. You're
Yeah.
not even going to be in the same homeroom together. Right?
Okay,
We're gonna put you somewhere different.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the time, you know, you're coming to the end of your first 12 years of this
Mm-hmm.
training, you're thinking to yourself, I can't wait to get away from these guys. I'm never going to see these guys again. It's going to be great. I'm going to go out and work and don't
Mm-hmm.
ever have to see these guys, don't ever have to deal with them, nothing. Getting out of here. That's how I was, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I left home for the Army 4 days after my high school
Is that right?
graduation.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you get out into you know, your work life and stuff, and it's the same way, right? It's the same way. If you're not happy with your job, or, you know, you just, screw this, I'm going to get another job. I don't want this job anymore. I'm
Right.
going somewhere else in a different group of people. You don't like your marriage, you can throw that away too.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
go get another marriage and
Yeah.
do it again somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, it's a real, like, disjunctive culture, moving culture. You know, I'm not living now where I grew up. My parents, where they raised me, that's not where they grew up, and so, you know, it's shifted. I got family all over the continent.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
In the Blackfoot world, this is completely different.
Right. Okay.
You're from here.
Yeah.
All of your ancestors have always been from here.
Right.
All of your, you know, your descendants are going to be here. Even when somebody moves away, you know, to go and do something, like, say you get say somebody gets a job with Assembly of First Nations, and they go to Ottawa for a while, they come back home when they're done there, right?
Right. Yeah.
This is the place you're going to be. This is where these are the people you're going to know for the rest of your life. There's
Right.
no running away from this.
Mm-hmm.
So because there's no running away from it, there's also this tendency not to create these really strong negative vibes in your relationships with
Sure.
people.
You don't want to, as they say, shit where you eat. So.
That's right. Yeah, you're in this together
Yeah.
for the long term.
Right.
And there's a level of willingness to help each other in this kind of situation. And this is what I think, like, even Maslow didn't get, right? When he's trying to figure out what's the key to this psychology, I think it's the relationship to place.
Okay.
It's the indigeneity. It's knowing that you belong here. And these are your, not just your people. These are your family.
Right.
When I go to the Sundance, it's a big encampment. You know, someone from the outside might, you know, see it as a whole bunch of different families and stuff. But really, someone from the inside, it's all one family.
All one group. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're all one family. Everybody's related.
Mm-hmm.
And working in the community is like that too. And even going to school in the community, even though the schools are set up in the same kind of disjunctive pattern as the mainstream, your teachers are your aunts and uncles.
Right. So right. Yeah, they are direct family, and
That's
you're
right.
you know, and if they're not, you still grew up with them.
Yeah,
You know, your
and you're
entire
going to know
life.
them forever.
Right.
You're not leaving. Right?
Yeah. And same with your classmates, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're cousins.
So it
Yeah.
it lends to a very different kind of perspective on, I think, who you are and what are your options and what are your sense of belonging and identity and culture and all of this. That, I think, is the biggest difference.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say it's just with Blackfoot, I'd say it's with Indigenous people in general.
Well, I wonder, as you were saying that, I don't know why I kept thinking this. I was watching too much Sopranos or something like that. But, you wonder, you think about, some village in Sicily or something, where, grandma was born in this village and, my mom was born in this village, my kids are born in this village. There's almost a similarity there.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to see, because in those communities, it's the same thing. That's always home. Now, that's probably been ripped apart, you know, as we've gone on into
in the
21st
diasporas
century.
for sure.
Yeah.
In the diasporas, it's been, you know, the diasporas have joined the mainstream basically. What starts those kind of diaspora movements, I don't know. That's a mystery to me. But I think, like the kind of communities you're talking about, those are indigenous communities too. You know?
Sure.
It's not just brown people that are indigenous. Anybody, you know, I went to Scotland, and yeah,
my family in Germany and Ireland. So my family's family was in this county of Ireland.
Right.
You can trace back hundreds of years.
Yeah.
You know, if not longer, if you really wanted to dig into it. So yeah. It's
So yeah, there's indigenous communities around the world.
Mm-hmm.
One time we were asked, there was, I think it was the University of Poland. You know, Eastern Europe is, a lot of people there are very interested in First Nations cultures.
Okay.
They have these like clubs.
Oh really?
Yeah, and the clubs will take on like a certain tribes. They'll try to learn a certain tribe's language. And,
Really?
And make traditional clothing of that tribe and learn like the ceremonies and technologies and stuff of that tribe.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the University of Poland approached us one time and they said, you know, a lot of people in Poland and throughout Eastern Europe take distance learning, and one of the classes that we host that's most successful is this antiquated Nordic language that's really not a living language anymore.
Okay.
But it's very old, and people are really excited about that old language, and we get hundreds of people a semester, sometimes thousands enrolled in that course online.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
But we think if you did a couple of your Ghana studies courses with us online, it would be way more popular than
Is that right? Yeah.
Because people have a much greater interest, and you make a lot of money.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we were looking into this. We were thinking, all right, maybe we'll do this with these guys. And it got all the way up to the point where they were going to advertise on the train systems in Poland.
Oh wow. Okay.
And we were talking to the guys who were going to make the ads, and they were like, you know, when we're making an ad campaign, we kind of need a story. We're really presenting a story, right?
Okay.
And so we want to present somehow the story of why would somebody want to take your Ghana Studies courses. And I told, well, you know, the way that I look at it, the big benefit of, you know, people that are fascinated with these First Nations cultures, what we can show them is how Blackfoot culture comes from this particular place, and how it emerges here and why it belongs here, right? Mm-hmm. And then hopefully then people can look at themselves and where they're at and start getting interested in their own indigenous culture there. Yeah. What I don't want to do is I don't want to have these classes and then we have 1,000 people from Poland show up at the Sundance here. Right. And we're not training. We don't want to train people to be Blackfoot, right? Yeah. And the guy says, well, Ryan, you know, you can't change what's in somebody's heart. And I said, yeah, but I don't got to teach it to them either. that's where things just broke down.
Oh dear. Okay.
We never did do these. The story they wanted was very different.
Okay. Then what you were hoping for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the unfortunate thing, you know. I really do think, like, you know, there are indigenous ways from everywhere. Right. And at some point, like, there's this guy John Trudell, who's a native poet, and he and a very outspoken political person. He's been for years. He was once the spokesman for the American Indian movement. But you know, he says everybody's from a tribe originally, right? Everybody. And this whatever happened, somehow everybody's met this trauma and stuff from this colonizing machine thing that's going around, this mining thing. You know? It's true.
Yeah.
And it's messed everybody up.
Right. Well, the history of and it's it's like I said, it's the same thing in Western Europe.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
You don't think about it today, but I mean, Western Europe was colonized by the Romans.
Yeah.
It was which was colonized from somebody else. And, it's a whole history of empire, right?
Yeah.
So,
when we went, myself, my wife, and Narcissus,
Mhm.
kind of studies, and his wife, we went to Scotland and England, and looking around there, I could see the indigenous culture. And what was amazing was I could see very close similarities to things here. Like, for instance, we went to this one. They have these stone circles, like Stonehenge.
right. Yeah.
They've got, people from here, if they don't know,
Yeah.
they think that Stonehenge is the only thing over there.
Right.
There's hundreds of these.
Yeah. There is. Yeah. Yeah. I had Gordon Freeman on the podcast from U of A.
Oh yeah.
Who's studied
He's
the
looking at
Majorville.
Majorville.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Well,
had him on not too long ago, and
I went to this place
Yeah.
in Scotland
Yeah.
where they had one of these stone circles that was, ringed around with those, I forget what they call those kind of stones on the outside, but then it was totally filled in with small boulders, like, smaller than bowling ball size, softball size rocks, completely filled in. Next to it was another big circle, but it was two crescents
Okay.
and empty in the middle.
Mhm.
And then off to the side of that was one lone big boulder. And they had an interpretive sign there about what kind of ceremonies and stuff might have taken place there, and alignments with this and that and stuff, and whether there's, burials and that. And I looked at it and I said, well, that's the sun and the moon and the morning star. It's the same as Majorville.
Same thing. Yeah.
And, even the Scots don't know this.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, exactly. It's been lost, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the same. Majorville's the sun and the moon and the morning star as well.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a place where you go and you make offerings to them, because they're considered to be really like the source of life, especially the sun.
Right.
Here, the opening of every prayer is Io Napimatos Spatapio, which is you're calling, you're saying Io, old man, sun, the source of life.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you, and I'd like to. I know sometimes it's not easy to chat about, or not able to chat about the spirituality, but
Right.
I definitely would like to chat. But I wanted to ask you something about that first, because as actually you talked about it in terms of transmission of traditional knowledge, and one of the things that I'm really interested in, sort of, is especially lately, I get into fights with friends over this. I'm gonna have a knockdown drag out here on the podcast probably within the next month. But basically, I have this friend who takes a very ardent materialist perspective of science. Physics will solve all, and everything that we need to know is object. And I don't come from that particular perspective. I think, to be honest, the world's a lot more mysterious and creative than materialist science tends to allow for. So when you're talking about worldview and traditional knowledge, and the, I guess, maybe the dance between modern scientific method versus traditional methods of knowledge. So what encompasses that transmission and that view of traditional knowledge?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I guess so. So you talked about there's a course at U of L that I was really interested in taking in terms of transmission of traditional knowledge and traditional worldview of, not necessarily a social worldview, but the world as a whole. So I guess my question is, how is that different than maybe from.
How is traditional knowledge transferred?
Well, how is it? But how is in terms of the overall worldview, in terms of learning, in terms of, I mean, we talked a little bit sort of on the social side, but
right.
I mean, talking about the perspective of the sun, the moon, as being sources of life.
Right.
I guess is there a difference there between traditional Blackfoot knowledge of learning about the world from the modern materialist
Yeah,
perspective that we have.
one of the big differences that I would identify is the Blackfoot perspective. There's much more life in the world.
Okay. Yeah.
For instance, if we go to a place like Majorville, which we do, we'll take our students out to this place. We'll sit down at Majorville and we'll eat, we'll pray, we'll speak right to the cairn.
Okay.
Omokakstaks is what it's called in Blackfoot. That place. We'll speak to it. Then we'll eat and we'll share food with it.
Okay.
And we'll spend time there, just basically spending time there with it, and might learn something from the experience. Sure. It's treated like a living elder, basically. Okay. And then you contrast that with if you go to a Blackfoot site that has been kind of taken over by the province, and it's become one of these interpretive things for tourists.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Then you have a situation where, first of all, you're going to have, even at the smaller ones that have been made into these tourist attractions, you got this sign, right? That's going to tell you what it is, and the people that go there will, instead of engaging with the place, they'll engage with the sign.
With the sign, right? Okay.
And to me, that sign is a tombstone. It's here lies Napi's Rock, or whatever. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And you're not supposed to, like, it's still treated like if you go to the Head Smashed in Buffalo Jump, for instance. This is at one of these kind of places. It's still treated like a respected elder, but it's treated like a deceased elder in the mainstream tradition. And so one of the things that the mainstream culture does, around its death complex, is this attempt to preserve the body. I don't understand why, but there's this really big attempt to preserve the body. You want to try to keep it in this state, and hopefully it doesn't decay anymore from here. We got to put some chemicals and stuff in it, make sure it stays this way. Yeah. And we're going to entomb it and stuff so that nothing can get into it and mess with the body. It's going to stay preserved in this state, right? Right. So this is what they do at these places too.
Right. Okay.
They you're not supposed to really engage with those places and change anything or mess with it. You go to write on stone, you're not supposed to actually write on the stone.
Right. It's not meant to be a living.
That's right. It's
participatory.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You're not supposed to be participating anymore with it. If you do want to learn from it, you do it in the same way as the Western people learn from their dead, which is through autopsy, which is what archaeology is.
Right. Sure.
So you cut open the body and see what's inside and what the innards can tell you, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's a real, to me, when I look at the two different systems, this is one of the big differences that I see is in Blackfoot, in the Blackfoot worldview. There's all of these living relationships, not only with place, but with animals, and with the sun and the moon, and everything, right? You have all these living relationships you're engaging in, as compared to, in the mainstream, you have some living relationships, but you have a lot of death.
Right, and focusing on the, like you said, the autopsy, measuring, the shadow, measuring of the sun, measuring how many grizzly bears are in the woods, and how big do they get, and what are some of the
and you see this going on with the parks and stuff too, right? You go to Waterton, you're not supposed to actively engage with that place as a human being. They're trying to preserve the body.
Right. That says a lot, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. I was blown away. We took our students to Yellowstone Park.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, they got all these bison and bears and wolves and stuff. This is all the animals that would be here that would normally this was like the Serengeti of North America here. Yeah. But those animals had to retreat to the cauldron of an active volcano in order to survive. The few that did.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is about the worldview is about that. It's not what you can measure. It's not what you can
it's all about relationships.
that connection.
That's right. Yeah.
So I guess maybe that, I don't know if that dovetails into more the spiritual
It
aspect.
definitely does.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's all about renewing those relationships and maintaining relationships and creating new linkages. Like the bundles when they transfer. Well, first of all, I should kind of. Somebody hears the word bundle.
Yeah, because
no clue what
yeah.
talking about.
and also this, I've always. The bundles I've learned a little bit about, but it's and you mentioned also the societies too, because I think some people are like, oh, what's that?
Yeah,
Masons? What's that?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so I think probably the easiest way for me to kind of like give people a clue about what these bundles are and what they're about is to talk about a little bit about the bundle that my wife and I take care of, which is the beaver bundle, which is the original first Blackfoot bundle.
Okay.
This came out this originated this bundle a long time ago. In the origin story, have the first domestic dogs, and so this is how old it is. Whenever we got our first dogs, that's how the beaver bundle is.
Okay.
And the way the beaver bundle came about, there was this guy who was really good at trapping and preserving hides. He was a real expert in. He couldn't just, it wasn't just like that. He was expert at trapping a certain species. He would pick individuals. And he would make sure he got the fanciest looking of each species.
Okay.
And he was preserving their hides, and then he used those for trade and stuff. So he had a young wife and an infant son, and he took them up by the mountains by what's now called Lower St. Mary's Lake, but in Blackfoot, all those big mountain lakes, the upper and lower St. Mary's, as well as Waterton and Lake Sherbourne, are all called Bachtomachsikimi, which means the inner waters.
Okay.
And but at that lower St. Mary's is where this whole story occurs, and he stays there with his wife and infant son, and he's out all day doing his trapping stuff. Right? He's hardly ever home. Sometimes he's gone for a few days, and his wife is getting kind of lonely. Okay? She's just there, and she's thinking, well, it would be nice if maybe some of my sisters came and stayed up here, or this and that. But the guy just wants her to stay at home, and doesn't want to bring a bunch of people up there. He's going to disturb the animals and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So she becomes increasingly lonely, and in her loneliness, this kind of young beaver man, this male beaver, notices that she's all by herself all the time and seems to be lonely and stuff. So he decides to shapeshift, to transform himself to look human, and then charm her to come with him.
Okay.
So he ends up charming her and taking her to his family's lodge in the lake. And the man comes home. The man's name was Whitegrass. He comes home. Whitegrass comes home, and his wife's not there. And his infant son is just crying. And of course, he's an excellent, tracker.
Right.
So he goes outside to try to track down his wife, and her prints lead right to the lake, and then they're gone. And then he's walking along the edge of the lake one way, the other, can't find any other tracks, but he does find some bear tracks. And then he starts thinking, there's a possibility, she got taken by a bear.
Yeah.
And so he waits, goes back to his lodge, and he's waiting, and, goes out, walks around, looks for her some more. waiting, and nighttime comes and she's not back yet. Now he knows something's really wrong, and he starts actually breaking down a little bit, crying and stuff. He's starting to really convince himself that she's been eaten. And of course his infant son is crying. You don't have Simlac in those days, right? However long ago it was, 7,000 years ago or whatever. So there's a troubled situation.
Right, yeah.
Right? So he's staying up. He's late at night crying, and then this man walks into his lodge. This old man, and there's something very different about this guy. And the old man tells him, "Don't cry about your wife. She's not dead.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, you could get her back. I'll tell you where she's with the beavers. That's where she is, and she's there because she was lonely, and you just kept leaving her alone. But I'll help you get her back. But you'll have to follow. Got some instructions to give you, and I can't just give them all to you tonight. But for tonight, just stop worrying about it, and we'll work it out." Right.
Right. Yeah.
So the man leaves. Another whole day passes. The kid is starving, and the next night the man comes back, and he tells him, "Well, this is what's happened. This young beaver charmed your wife. She's living with them, but the way you're going to be able to get her back is you're going to need to capture their favorite pup. They have this little all white pup. And if you capture that pup, you'll be able to make a trade back for your wife, because they're going to do anything for that pup. It's their favorite pup."
Okay. Yeah.
Then you get your wife back. But there's a certain, procedure. Like, you're not just going to be able to capture him very easily.
Right. Just walk up.
I know exactly how you can capture him, but I'll come back and I'll give you that. So third night comes along, and again the kid is just starving, and the old man comes back, and he tells him, "All right, you're going to go down. There's a certain patch of willows at this spot on this edge of the lake, and that little white pup always goes to that patch of willows. You're going to dig a trench in there, and you're going to go around the lake, and you're going to find a bunch of duck droppings, and you smear them all over your body to mask your scent, and you're going to hide in that trench. And then when the pup comes up to get some willow to eat, you're going to grab him and just bring him back to your lodge, and then I can tell you from there that you have the pup." So the next day he does all of this, and he's sitting in the trench all day. It's starting to get dark, and some beavers have come and gone, but no little white pup, right? Just with the last bit of light, he sees this wake in the water approaching him, and as it comes closer, he sees it's that little pup, and when it comes ashore, jumps out and grabs it and goes to his lodge with it, and he's holding it. And as soon as he comes into the lodge with that little white pup, and the baby sees it, it's all smiles. They've been bawling, bawling and sleeping incessantly. Suddenly he's smiling. The old man comes in. He says, "Good, you've got the pup. So this is what you're going to do. You're not just going to take an easy trade for your wife. There's more to this than that.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to do something important here. They're going to send an emissary, somebody to talk for them, and they're going to say, give the pup, and they'll send your wife back. No. You wait till all the beavers come here, and then these are the things you're going to ask for." This old man gave him a whole list. Until you've got all of this, no trade, right? So the old man departs. A little while later, it's dark. He hears somebody approaching the lodge, and this skinny guy with this long face comes in, and he's wearing this otter cape.
Okay. Yeah.
comes in and says, you know, the beavers have sent him. They have his wife, but you've got their grandchild they want back. So if you give that pup back, then he'll bring his wife. And the whitegrass, he just sat holding the pup, petting it. Didn't even look up at the man. He just said, no, you go and tell them this is a bad thing that they've done to my family. This is the first time my child stopped crying, you know, since they took his mother. They're not getting this pup back. It's staying here. So the otter man leaves. Little while later, the man hears a lot of noise out there, and moves all around the outside of his lodge, and then people start coming in. And first one in is his own wife, and she's got this strap on her head, and she's got this bundle, this like roll of stuff on her back, and she walks in, and behind her there's a whole family of these stubby people, these beaver capes coming in, and he sees the skinny guy from before. He sees all these weird people, all these different shapes and sizes.
Right.
And the animals, you know, they're all the different animals. They've all transformed themselves to look kind of human, but kind of not human, right? They don't want to scare him, but so they try to look like people, but they don't quite cut it right. So they all come in and they're sitting around, and there's a really old man beaver that sits right beside him, and he starts untying that bundle, and then he brings out, he's got like an eagle, a preserved eagle's pelt, and he sings this song, and he passes this eagle pelt over this man's head and hands it to him, and gives him like this, puts that song into him basically. Okay. This is a podcast, so you can't really see
right,
it, but basically, so he's doing a hand gesture to shoot that song into him, and then he brings out a wolf, and he's got 7 different animals in this bundle. They're all animals that the beaver are afraid of.
Okay.
These are predators of the beavers.
Right.
And he sings these songs. He tells the man, okay, now I've given you my bundle, my family's bundle, and I've taught you the songs for it, and I brought your wife back, and all I want is my grandchild. And the man says, it's just petting Whitegrass, just petting that pup, doesn't even look up.
Yeah.
He says, no, it's not enough. And then that skinny otter guy stands up, and he says, Mama Tapi, the nerve of this guy, this human being. He says, why are we going to take this from this guy? These people, these humans have only just arrived here, like yesterday. And look at him. He's soft. He's slow. He can't fly. Can't swim worth a damn. He runs so slow. He's worthless. He's got no redeeming qualities at all. They don't even belong here. They're totally not adapted to this place. And we're gonna take flack from this guy. No. We don't have to go through with this. Why don't we just all gang up and eat him? We just pounce on him.
Sure,
We'll eat him. And so the animals, they're looking at each other. It sounds pretty good.
I am getting a little hungry. Yeah.
The old beaver, he's thinking about it, and he says, no. We could. You're right. The guy is soft and slow and weak and all of this stuff. and we could gang up on him real easily. We can eat him and we can be done with this.
Yeah.
But if we do that, we all know that there's more human beings out there. They're gonna, one way or another, you know, something like that, it gets around.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna find out that this happened, and then they're gonna hate us. You know, there's already guys out there like this guy who's just looking to kill us for our skin.
Right.
In the future, if we kill this guy, it's going to be much worse, because all the humans are going to think of us as their enemies. Whenever they come across us, they're just going to kill us randomly.
Right.
It's not for food or anything. They just hate us. So no, we're not going to. Let's not kill him. Instead, let's transfer him what we have.
Mm.
Give them, you know, some things that'll help them so that they will become like, you know, they can make up for their inadequacies. Right? Teach them, you know, some things that are going to help them live here long.
Right.
You know, and so you say, you know, this is why I called you all here. You're all my relations. I need your help. You know, let's give this man some of what we've got. So each of these animals that, you know, the beaver, like, he's really a keystone species. Hey, they create these environments that are just thriving with life. So all these animals are from these, you know, these are animals that depend on the beavers. So they're all very, you know, willing to give up something of theirs. So each in turn, they came up and they would give their robe to the man, and they'd sing, you know, they might sing him one song, they might sing him 20 songs. The otter ends up going over 20 songs that he sings for the man. Each of the songs have, you know, very, very short bits of lyrics, but they teach you things about things that can help you escape dangers and these kind of things.
Okay.
Things that will give you longer life. Like the crow, for instance, singing a song about how to find eggs and the eggs will give you long life and this kind of thing. So they all give something to this man, and there's some funny stuff that happens. There's little side stories to each of these. I won't take up the whole podcast with the story. At the end, you know, everybody's giving him something, and or almost everybody has. There's these people sitting right by the door on either side that are covered up with blanket, and they haven't given him anything.
Right.
The old man beaver says, "All right, you know, we've given you a lot. All we want is our grandson." Whitegrass, it's not enough. What about them? So the one on this side takes his blanket off, and it's that old man that was coming.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then on the other side takes off the blanket, and there's an old woman there. And they start singing their songs, and then man realizes this is the sun, and this is the moon, and they sing a lot of songs. And when they're done, the moon looks outside and motions in, and a younger man comes in, and he brings two of these animals they've never seen before.
Okay.
These are the first dogs.
Okay. Yeah.
They're kind of like wolves, but
They're different, yeah.
They're different.
Yeah.
And it says, you know, we brought you this is this male dog. When you're moving place to place, you make a trap or some sticks you'll tie to this dog, and you put the bundle in there, and he'll carry the bundle. We're giving you this female dog. She'll make more dogs, and then all of the people, you give these to other people, and they'll all have dogs, and these dogs will protect you. So after that, then the Whitegrass finally gave up the pup, and he said he was going to change his name to Natotsi-Anipi, change his name from Whitegrass to Natotsi-Anipi, brings down the sun, to commemorate this event. So both of those names are still alive in Blackfoot communities.
Okay.
There's still people with the name. white grass, and the people that the name brings down the sun.
Okay.
But yeah, so this this is the creation of the first bundle, and it's really a treaty between the human beings and the animals.
Mm.
And Blackfoot people have made many treaties since then,
Mm-hmm.
in the same manner as that original one.
Sure.
Even the Treaty 7 that was made here with Europeans with the Queen happened in almost the same way, where you had the Treaty Commission, went to camp at the spot where they wanted to make the treaty, and the Blackfoot were surrounding them. Right? Blackfoot camps strategically were positioned around them, and there was a lot of warriors there.
Yeah.
And they were like, let's just kill these guys. Why don't we just kill them?
Yeah.
And be done with it? But then you got these guys like Red Crow and Crowfoot, they were like the old beavers.
Yeah.
And the story just lives out again. They're like, no,
Yeah.
if we kill these guys, we all know there's a ton of these white people, and they're going to find out about it. They're going to hate us.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, let's transfer some of what we know to them, and they can live here like, the way that we live.
Mm.
And that was the Blackfoot kind of intent of the treaty, was the Europeans that moved here would get knowledge transfer from Blackfoot people about how to live here.
Yeah.
And this is the same relationship like with the Blackfoot have with Sarcee. Sarcee is a relatively recent tribe to move into this territory.
Okay.
And while they're totally allowed to keep their own language and stuff, the way of life and even the spiritual tradition, the bundles, were transferred to them.
Oh.
They got to live the same way Blackfoot people do.
Okay. Yeah.
They can have a different language,
Yeah.
But
those
the
core traditions and those
relationships,
relationships. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so every time that a bundle transfers, basically it's like a reenactment of the origin of that bundle.
Mm.
And you're doing that experience to a new person,
Mm-hmm.
and a new person is entering into that set of relationships.
Right.
And like with the beaver bundle, our responsibility really is to try to keep good relationships with the animals, because this is the original, this is the treaty with the animals. This is what allowed human beings to live here.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of the main focus of that bundle, but there are many different types of bundles. And the beaver bundle is the first, and it's also kind of the creative nexus of things. Somebody could have just a dream where an animal gives them a song, or they can just have an experience when they're out in the coulees and an animal gives them something that's powerful.
Right.
And somebody who takes care of a beaver bundle can ask that person to transfer it in. They don't give it up, but it then also becomes a part of the bundle.
Okay.
And then somebody could have an experience where they're given some kind of a bundle, some kind of a pipe from some other animals or spirits, and in order to bring it into the orthodox fold of the Blackfoot tradition, the beaver bundles will add to it.
Okay.
There was a woman one time who disappeared for a while, and then she came back around, and she had this infant son and this digging stick for roots and this juniper wreath on her head, and she had this story that she had been taken up into the stars, and she was married to a star.
Okay.
And this star was a child of the sun and the moon, and the moon had trained her in food roots and stuff, and they had given her a new thing to add to an existing ceremony at the Sundance, and a lot of people laughed at her. But then the people with the beaver bundles heard her story, and they said, no, we think that she really had this experience. She's going to do that ceremony. We're going to give her our elk headdress to replace her juniper wreath, and then nobody can question it. Okay? And so this is the way that the beaver bundle kind of feeds the growth of the spiritual tradition in the Blackfoot world, and the way that, you know, other experiences are kind of brought in, and so the beaver bundle is always changing. Hey?
Okay.
There's things coming in and
So it's
going
not
out.
a static thing.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
But a lot of the other bundles have more of a static quality.
Okay. Okay.
The people that are taking care of those bundles can have some experiences themselves, you know, that give them instruction to add things to it, and then they do it. But those bundles don't feed other bundles,
Right.
creations,
Yeah.
the way that the beaver bundle does. So there's all kinds of bundles, and there's things that we call the societies. They're basically age grade groups.
Okay. Yeah.
And those groups will have several interrelated bundles from a single event. Sometimes it's from a single event. Like there's a dove society, and all the bundles from that society have an origin together. Okay? But they're smaller, you know, bundles than say the beaver bundle. It's got all of these different things wrapped into it. The bundles for the societies are smaller bundles, no less important or anything.
Right. Yeah.
But they might all come from one experience, or like the Horn Society. This is a group, like the Horn Society is very, very strong in the blood reserve. Even nowadays, it's stronger than the beaver bundles in terms of, you know, it's held in very high regard by peoples. It came about after the smallpox waves went through, killed a lot of people, and kind of the survivors of other societies came together and created this new society. So you see like 4 or 5 different societies amalgamated into what's now called the Horn Society on the Bloods. So some of the societies have these kind of convoluted histories where the bundles in those societies used to belong to, you know, 3 or 4 other different societies, and now they've been amalgamated. The Women's Motoki Society is the same way. It's got bundles that used to belong to, I think, 4 different societies in the past that are now together as one society. These kind of things have gone on through history to shape the societies that now exist. But yeah, originally they're kind of age grade groups. So when you're a young child, you might be transferred into there used to be a mosquito society. It's not around anymore. And then you get to a certain age, and your whole group might transfer into take over the Dove Society.
Right.
At the same time, the Doves transfer over into the Crazy Dogs, and the Crazy Dogs transfer into the Horns. And all the societies move up.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
In the past, after you've done all the age grade societies, then you might take care of a Thunder Pipe, which is more of an individual bundle, and then only the very older people would take care of beaver bundles.
Okay.
It's a huge anomaly. Well, it's one of these historical things. It was because the beaver bundles were targeted by the incoming clergy.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah.
They said this is the pivot point for the whole thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
They take it out. It's stale. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
So they took a lot of the bundles out. Plus, when the smallpox waves went through, you know, it's the old people that were taking care of the beaver bundles, and a lot of them were wiped out by the smallpox.
Yeah.
So the beaver bundles took a great big hit, and they're just starting to come back. Maybe since, well, first of them started to come back in the 1970s. There was 2 bundles, but really after 1995, then there was this wave of bringing back the beaver bundles from the museums. So now you've got, for the most part, kind of middle-aged people taking care of these, where it would have been very older people,
more senior. So, and I just have a question. So, in the society, so is that, I mean, they're sort of centered around the bundles, but is there sort of a, I mean, when I hear society, I mean, anybody, you know, for mainstream society, you know, you think of, you know, the society for X cause, so
Yeah.
they get together and they do things. You know, is it more transmission of knowledge or experience between the members, or
Yeah, it's well, it's the main thing about it. And like, I've never been in a society, so some people will hear me talk about societies and they'd be like, "Hey, what are you talking about
You don't know what
societies?
you're talking about,
You've
yeah."
never been in societies." But you know, my perspective on it is the
Yeah.
main thing with societies is the same thing that's with everything else in the Blackfoot system, which
Mhm.
is it's about the relationships.
Okay.
And so you're coming into a set
Okay.
of relationships. It's like a, you know, like a brotherhood kind of
Sure.
a thing.
Okay. Yeah.
To go into one of these societies, and those people that are in there with you become your siblings.
Okay.
And
Okay.
you
Yeah.
really address them as such even.
Right.
And that's those relationships are lifelong. The people that transfer you, that took care of the bundle before you, are your
Mhm.
parents. The people that had it before them are your grandparents.
Mhm.
It's actually your grandparents that teach you on the bundles.
Right.
What
Okay.
you're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's really it's a way to extend kinship webs throughout the whole
Gotcha.
Blackfoot society.
Okay.
And it's not just between the people, because the bundles,
Mhm.
the bundles define these relationships with with cosmic
Right.
beings and with animals and these kind of things.
Right.
So yeah, it's about creating and maintaining relationships. And yeah, there's ceremonies and
Okay.
that go along with it. But for the most part, the ceremonies are pretty, you know, it's prayer,
Mhm.
and dance.
Mhm.
Like with the beaver bundles, for instance, you're doing a lot of the ceremonies. You're doing the mating dances of each of those animals. It's a celebration of life.
Sure. Yeah.
Those kind of things. There is a lot of traditional knowledge, like ecological knowledge, and these
Mhm.
kind of things that go along with the transfer of the bundles.
Okay.
Each different bundle, like in Blackfoot, you consider it a way of life.
Mhm.
It's a different way of life that you're going into with a different family. That's
Okay.
kind of a thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But you keep all your old.
Right. It's
Families
not
are
it's you know
too,
it's
yeah.
not like you were saying before.
Yeah, it's
you
not
just
the disjunction. Yeah, it's not the disjunction. It's adding more
Adding more
relationships.
to it, yeah.
Adding more and more relationships.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned, so I just want to ask about two more things, and then you'd mentioned to the thunder pipe, so
Yeah.
more of an individual bundle. So
Yeah, that bundle, like the beaver bundle, is all the bundles are taken care of by couples.
Okay.
They're never taken care of by just a single person.
Okay. Yeah.
Except for the case of some of the children's bundles, because they're not married yet.
Mhm.
They would have individual bundles, but in all of the societies and the bundles that are not in society, not society bundles, like the thunder pipes and the beaver bundles are not society bundles.
Mhm.
They're taken care of by couples. So yeah, so the thunder pipe is a bundle that is the sole responsibility of a couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the beaver bundle is the same.
Okay.
And there was other types of bundles in the past too. There could be like the thunder pipes bundles and the beaver bundles. They're all considered pipe bundles. And then you had the Caesar's pipe. There was another type of pipe.
Okay.
There was several different types of pipe bundles, and these were non-society types of bundles in the past.
Okay.
And then you also had things like there was a bundle that was called the bear knife, for instance.
Okay.
There was a knife.
Okay. Yeah.
Made out of a bear's jaw.
Oh.
Transfer for it. It was very sharp and heavy knife.
Mhm.
Transfer for it was the guy who had it before you throw it at you as hard as he could. And you had to catch it.
A little bit of risk in some of these
Yeah.
transfers here. So.
Yeah. That was for warriors.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
A lot of the songs and stuff that go with it, and the kind of like people refer to them as medicine bundles.
Right.
They're full of different kind of medicines. A lot of them had dual purpose. They would be used for kind of charms for war, to be successful in war. Like say, with the beaver bundles, for instance, there's like there's northern flickers in there. It's kind of woodpecker, right? To be it has a little tie on it, so a warrior could tie it on his hair. So if somebody was going to war, he might come to a beaver man and ask to have this transferred to him, and it would be so that you look at one of those flickers on a tree, and if it sees you looking at it, it'll hop to the other side of the tree like that. Okay? So you'd be able to dodge just like
I see. Okay.
when you go to war.
Yeah.
Those kind of things.
Yeah.
But the exact same medicine could be used in warfare against sickness.
Right, because there's a lot of confusion. I think a lot of people that don't, they think you're talking about medicine, and medicine, in English has a particular connotation, but it's not. Right. It's not the same, right? In the spiritual sense.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's like spiritual warfare
to
fight sickness, and sickness in Blackfoot is. This is again very different from the Western, but it goes along with what I was saying about the living before.
Right.
Sickness is conceived of as a relational problem.
Okay.
And so sometimes you might even treat the family member of the sick person in order to cure the sick person.
Right.
These kind of things. There's relationship issues, and the reason that we even got into the beaver bundle is because my wife got very sick.
Okay.
I don't know if you know her story, but she had a really, really bad crippling rheumatoid arthritis, and so our taking on the beaver bundle was a vow to cure her sickness. And it's basically by entering into this new set of relationships, maybe we could get away from whatever it was spiritually that was attacking her,
right?
Whatever being that was, by changing our relationships.
Okay.
So this is the other aspect of it. There was a real there's warfare, and there's spiritual
warfare,
against things like sickness.
Okay.
So, and they're still used for all of for the sickness stuff today.
Okay.
They're not really used much to hurt other humans anymore.
Fair deal.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you one other question.
Yeah.
So there's a resurgence, certainly, and the prominence is a lot more in terms of South American indigenous cultures, but it has started through the U.S. as well. You're gonna ask me where the hell is he going with this? Are we
talking about psychedelics?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was actually gonna ask: is there a tradition in the Blackfoot community of any sort of psychedelic use for spiritual purposes or ceremonial purposes?
Not that I've ever run into.
Okay.
In terms of something you ingest.
Okay.
But there certainly were hardships that you put the body through that would put you in the same, or not the exact same, but
right. But a similar.
Your mind would be having problems, and you might have hallucinations, and you might have some really spiritual experiences in the midst of it. Like, say for instance, if you don't eat or drink for 4 days and you're sitting on the top of a mountain baking in the sun,